Hello, KGC fans and listeners. Welcome back to the show. And before we get into our great guest today, let me just tell you that he is making his own music and producing it. And it's incredible, along with some friends to help him, of course. Ron Fairchild is a great musician and an even better person. And we're going to learn about him today. And we're also going to be opening the show today a very unique kind of way. So, without further ado, please head on over to ronfairchild.com for everything great about this, my brother. And we've gotten to become close over the past couple of years, or over the year or so, and it's my honor. Please make welcome back to the show again, my friend and yours, Ron Fairchild. How you doing, Ron?
Doing great, man. Doing great.
Great to have you on the show.
That's a beautiful day here. The weather, I don't know that I could ever ask for any better weather. Finally, after all that storm that we had, it's kind of, looking great again. I mean, you just really couldn't ask for better. Just beautiful.
Yeah. So first off, I want to say at the top of the show, thank you for 44 years as one of the best keyboard players that the Oak Ridge Boys have ever had playing behind them. Thank you for not only that, but Dwayne tells a story, and we're going to get to that here in a second before we get into anything. But I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, and I know that a lot of people watching this want to say thank you for 44 years of great music.
Oh, appreciate that. I've had an incredible ride. I mean, I've done other things, but certainly nothing has had the longevity of that. And we uh we went everywhere and did everything. And it just, it was something that is 2/3 of my life. It really is. It's just a wonderful thing to put on my wall.
Yeah. Uh, earlier in the year, I kind of want to do this because the KGC show is all about relationships, and one of the things that I love most about is just finding good-hearted stories about people. And I know that over the past couple of months, over the past year, it's been a real hard, difficult time for the boys. And starting off with Nora Lee, what was Nora Lee Allen like for you as a role model, and not only your music playing, but just you as a person?
Well, I met her when I think I was still in single digits, but when my father was in the group and Dwayne came around, he started dating her and she got friendly with my mother. And this had to have been the 60s. And they just got to be really close and all. And it's not that she was all that much older than me, because she really wasn't, but she was just always very, very nice. And of course, her and Dwayne got closer and closer. And then finally, when he married her, we had I'd kind of gone off in another direction and a bit until 78 or 9 or whenever I had hooked up with them. And then of course she was married to Dwayne, and she had 2 kids, and I of course enjoyed their company a lot, still do. Um, but Nora Lee was just always somebody who, she didn't make a lot of noise. She didn't have to. What she did spoke for itself, so she wasn't a very overtly out there in your face kind of person, but she got the job there on the Opry and did that for, Lord, I don't even know how many years, but very highly respected. And it was very, I don't know, as unexpected the word, it was certainly sad when she developed some health issues, and that really it hit me kind of hard. I mean, the people that go back with me that far, well, I like to keep them close, and then when the day actually came, it was Easter Sunday, and I had gone to play a church with a friend of mine here. And when I got back, my whole family was here on the deck and having family. And then a text came in to my phone that she had passed that very day. And of course, I broke down. I don't mind saying, and it was terrible. All my family's looking at me like, "What happened?" And Kim knew, and all that. But I mean, it just tore me up. I had to go walking through the yard to try to process it, and that was a tough funeral, man. They're all tough, but
Yeah.
that one was one of the tougher ones. I just thought the world of her, and gone too soon.
Yeah. And thank you, Nora Lee, for your years. And didn't she write a chorus in an Oak song called um "This Is America" or something? Didn't she write like a chorus of like "This Is My Homeland" or something?
I it was my understanding she wrote that song, or at least co-wrote it. And that's not all she ever did, but yeah, they did cut that song, and we did it there for a year or two. So that was a nice lick.
Yeah. Can you talk to us a little bit about our dear friend here on the show, William Lee Golden? His son Rusty passed away just a few days before the next guy that we're gonna get you to talk a little bit about. But can you talk to us a little bit about what your friendship with Rusty Golden was like?
Well, that one goes way back to well, Golden came around 65, and of course, Rusty and I were within a few months of the exact same age, and he was a drummer at the time, and I was playing a whole lot of bass guitar. I just love the bass guitar. My dad tried to get me to go over to piano all the time. I played piano coincident with all my bass playing, but we were all into Elton John and Dee Murray and Nigel Olsson and all that. So we would get together and we learned how to play together. Many's the time we were at over at Williams and Fro Jean's house over there. And if we weren't there, we were at my parents' place. We had a little rec room that we used as a rehearsal hall. And Rusty and I just played together up until the mid 70s. And, he goes back with me further really than anybody. And then Fred Satterfield would be number two on that. But then we kind of parted ways for a bit when he went off with the Gatlins, and I did my little stints with some gospel groups and Brenda Lee and Dottie West. And then when I got with the Oaks, of course, I kind of reconnected with Rusty because he's family.
Mhm.
And throughout all of Rusty's things, I would record his bands and stuff like that. And just always around, Rusty was one of those people like throughout my life, always there. So when I got a call about that, that was equally bad. I mean, it's like, come on, man, what's next? I've learned not to ask what's next because, sometimes you're going to find out. But that was a really tough one. And I was supposed to go down to Bruton to play at that funeral. I had talked with Chris about it and we had everything worked out. I was very, very sick, and I'm not sure. I think I tested positive for COVID that day. So there's no way I could have made a 650, 700-mile drive and then turned around and drove back. I just couldn't do it. So I wasn't able to be at that funeral, which hurt my feelings. But, I was able to play. William and Chris asked me to play the first date that they did
Mhm.
after Rusty passed. And that was really kind of tough because, that's Rusty's spot. And he's a performer, he's very outgoing and all. And I'm just a player. I just sit there and play. Pretty boring. But I drove up there to Virginia and played with him, and lots of nice people in the band, all of whom I knew. And I enjoyed doing that. So that was kind of like my tribute to Rusty.
Mhm. Is there is there a story with Rusty that you have that kind of identifies what kind of person he truly was?
Well, I don't know that I could call one off the top of my head. Lord, there's so many. And of course, once you throw out the ones you wouldn't tell. Um, I just remember, they had a group in the early 80s called the Boys Band, and it was Rusty and Greg Gordon and B. James Lowry. They actually had a record deal on Elektra, and most of the demos that they recorded that ended up being on their record and was supposed to be on the second record that never happened. I recorded all those in my home studio. I had a great time with Rusty during that period of time. And I guess that's the most that we did there for a long time was during the boys band period. But they lost that record deal, which most of those early record deals, well, not most, but a lot of them go away. And that one did. And then I recorded him with the Golden Spear band, which was in the early to mid 80s. And we just always worked together. It's off and on. We never were in a band together.
Mhm.
Since our school band, Canon, Canon, we had a school band in high school, and that was a pretty good group. We won we thought it was a big deal, the Sertoma Talent Show in Hendersonville, Tennessee, and I don't even know the year, but I was in high school. And it's funny, the guy that ran the sound that night, we won that Sertoma talent show. And the guy that ran the sound was John Meir, who has been with the Oaks even longer than I have. So that's how far I go back with John. We went to school together too. You know.
Talk to us a little bit about uh something that you when you were with the group, since we're finishing up this, what was one thing with the group that you kind of, now that you've had some time to sit back and think about your amazing career, what's one maybe one story or one thing that happened when you were with the guys that really made you say, I got to watch that unfold?
Well, again, there's so many. One of the, I love the word penultimate things is when we played that thing in Washington, D.C. It was July the 4th of some year, maybe 85, 86. Somebody with better memory would remember, but it was in two cities, if I recall, Philadelphia and Washington, D.C., and there was a rented 727 to get us from the show in Philadelphia down to DC. And I mean, it was really cool because the Beach Boys, Christopher Cross sat next to me on the plane getting down there, which was really cool because there's a talent beyond most people right there. And that was the day, good Lord, met Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin. I mean, Joan Jett and the Blackhearts. Oh, so here we are. There were 500,000 people on what they call the mall in DC.
Yeah.
And I'd never seen that many people. That's more than Woodstock. So we're there and they've got the schedule all worked out. I remember Mr. T. Remember that guy that used to go Pity the Fool? Him and his gold chains came up on our bus. That was really an experience. So we go there and we're getting ready to play our set. And before us was Joan Jett and the Blackhearts. And remember her big Elvira was I Love Rock and Roll. So she played her set and she's doing I Love Rock and Roll. And she's killing it, wearing those spandex pants and all that. And they're really rocked out. So they did a quick set change. And then we walked up there and did da 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 da. So we start with You're the One in a Million. And I looked over at Fred Satterfield and said, man, this is weird, to follow Joan Jett.
Yeah.
Everybody there was nice. I didn't see any super huge egos on that. Everybody just kind of threw in and made that a great show. And that's one of my best memories is that day in DC and Philadelphia.
Yeah. And you said that there was 1 million people at that mall?
No, 500,000.
500,000?
Yeah.
So is that more, were you more scared for or nervous for that performance to make it over go well than you did for the White House?
No, there's something about that White House. It doesn't matter who's the president. There's a respect factor because you may not like who's in there or who's going in there, but there's a respect thing that you have for that. And that day that we played for Reagan, certainly that was, and we've been there half a dozen times or so over the years, but there was a high degree of respect for that. And if you're going to get nervous, that's the one. And there was one time where the whole band didn't go. It was in the East Room, which is a smaller area. And I didn't realize one of the Secret Service guys was talking to me and Donnie Carr, who's the guitar player. It was just he and I. I didn't even play the piano. We had two acoustic guitars and we're sitting on a stool and the boys just going to sing with us. And one of those Secret Service guys was running the sound and he said, do you guys realize that there have been, he gave me the number of people, but less than 10 people who at that time had ever played in the East Room of the White House. And Donnie looked at me, we're just old guys from the small towns, and it's like, wow. So I like to say we were fishing in deep water at that thing, but we had a really good time.
Yeah. Wow. What such great stories from such a great group. Now let's kind of, as we drift away from the Oaks for a second, and I know we still have one more person that we cannot forget, but I think that talking about Joe Bonzel, 50 years of the Oak Ridge Boys is worth saving until the end of the show. And it lets you think up a Joe story or two, because we all know Joe was one of the most funniest people anybody can meet.
Well, ain't
And
that a fact? Yeah.
And I know you got a few Joe stories, but I want to talk to you a little bit about your website. You have a great website ran by Ginger Snaps on Twitter to me. But Ginger, she runs your website. Can you talk to us a little bit about how that collaboration came?
Yeah, I met her 2 years ago in December. We were doing that Opryland residency thing, the Christmas shows. There were like a month of it.
Mhm.
She's friends with we have a mutual friend in California. And then I found out a little bit later that she was a session singer and has sang with some pretty big people. I mean, Don Henley and Garth Brooks and Dolly Parton and Lord, there's been others too. But that's pretty deep waters to fish in right there. So we had a connection there, and she was starting to do websites, and I've owned or had the rights to ronfairchild.com for many years, but I don't know how to build a website, and I'm not interested in another learning curve. I've got all these recording programs and Photoshop and all that, and I don't have any more hard drive space up here. So she said, "Do you want me to take a run at it?" And I said, "Well, sure." So she got everything together and started putting stuff together. I would just send her raw material, and she made it all look like it does now. And I've heard that it's very well done. And I know that from time to time I'll hear from her and she'll say, "I need this, I need that." And I just provide what she says. And then she is in charge of keeping all that going. And now, I mean, we had it to where people could buy music, but that's not something people do anymore. Streaming is all people want to do. So I don't really expect to sell music, but I do want people to hear what I've done. And she has gotten, over the last month, my first record is out on streaming platforms, and I've got the list of them, and it must be 12 to 15. It looks like of those, and my goodness, what a list. I mean, it's YouTube Music, Pandora, iHeartRadio, some I don't recognize, Spotify, Apple Music, iTunes, Amazon Music, and YouTube. Of course, I know those, but it's out there and it's all legal. Of course, the first record, I wrote everything on it, so I don't have any publishing issues. But some of the stuff where I didn't write the songs, it might not be a lot of money, but it's going to be completely legal for the people that did write those songs to get paid.
Yeah.
And she stays on top of all of that, so I don't have those worries.
And
And
she
that's
does
been
a great job.
she's just very good at doing it. And if anyone needs a website done, I'd get a hold of her because she's very good at it.
I definitely do agree. And let's talk about this music since you mentioned it. Let's talk about it. You just mentioned that this is your very first, well, not your first record, but this is the first record that people can go stream on your website for free. And if they like what they can hear, they can also purchase it on your website as well. So, talk to us a little bit about how you got inspired to start working on this stuff.
Well, some of these songs, I mean, I've done some little vanity records over time, and some of these songs have been on those, but they weren't very good. And technology is so good now that the mixes I'm very happy with now. So some of this music, it's time for people to hear it, and it's up to modern recording standards. And I can look at the list of them, and uh, you know, I'd have to go back and say, what was I thinking whenever I wrote these things, And of course, some of that is lost to memory, but I just sit down at a piano or the tap guitars and um, something will come to mind. And I'll just say, "Hey, here's where we go with it." Then I usually morph over to the piano and write whatever I'm feeling. And I'm very proud of these. These are just the first 10. I must have 100 tunes that will all come out. I think volume 2 is due within the next week or so, I hope. And that'll be original as well. But I've got all of these different projects that run the gamut from new age and ambient stuff to what you could call smooth jazz. I don't really care for genres. The categories, they box you in. But it's got some playing on it. I mean, most all of it is done by just me on every instrument. There are a few exceptions. I had Chris Golden and Fred Satterfield from time to time. Greg Jennings, that was the guitar player for many years with Restless Heart, is one of my best friends. And Greg's playing some killer guitar on some of it. And the rest of the guitar I'm doing. So I give credit where it is due for the people that did help me. Chris played some incredible drums on some of these things. And the rest of it is program drums, but I enjoy it and I'm happy with those. I'm happy to put those songs to bed. I'm writing new stuff and constantly recording new material. Now that I'm off the road, I go in there. It's almost like a job every day. I walk into my studio room and I start writing or working on stuff that's already been written. And I'm just happy as the clam, as they say, and all sorts of different things. I have every recording toy and musical toy that a person could ever need to get the job done in there. So I just work in there until one of the great grandkids come over and make me quit. You know, that's pretty much when I quit because they want to go in there and start banging around on stuff. And I'm a kind of guy that can't say no. But I'm constantly doing new music. I know I've got 100 pieces of music to go up. So it's all going to be up there in time. We just, Ginger just put the first volume 1 up there and it is available on all those services now. Just do a keyword search for my name and there it'll be.
Right. So please go not only just listen to it, but just download it. It's good for what I've experienced because, like I've said, me and Ron have, I like to say that Ron is, I have two best friends, the Lord and Ron Fairchild. And that's, for me, that's very true. You know, Ron and I have, we've talked music, we've talked everything. And I'm going to tell you this, I can hear the passion in his voice in this interview, but it's when I call him and when we talk on our cell phones and I hear the passion that he has for this music, it shows in his voice. And so I know how he's excited so much for you guys to hear this. And please buy this man's not only his music, but just support Ron because he also has some great writings on the website. How did you get inspired by doing the blogs?
Well, one thing that I've noticed about people's websites is that a lot of times, and I won't bring up any names, but people that I admire a great deal in music production, players, their website never changes. They put it up and there it lays. Well, that sort of lies dormant. So the idea was to keep it fresh, put new music, put new pictures. A lot of my photography is up there. And also this thing, she got me onto this blog post thing. So whatever's on my mind or whatever's been happening, I'll write a piece, a literary piece and put it up there. And then I think she sends the links out to it. And it keeps people going back to it because you don't want it to just sit there and die. And sometimes I'm a little late on the uptake getting things up there, but uh, I do try to keep it, I'd like to do it once a week, and try to be funny, try to tell stories, um, maybe mention whatever's going on in life, and I think that keeps a website fresh.
Yeah. And you do such a great job at it, and she does too. You know, what? Whose idea was it to put some of your photos up there that you've done, uh, your photography that you've done?
Well, I certainly wanted that from the very beginning. And she was all for that. And she designed this whole thing to where, wow, you just go and look at it and you click on the pictures and they show great. They're high resolution. And it is time, I think, for me to get some new ones up there as well. But uh, my stuff from the Caribbean, I was big on going to the Caribbean a couple times a year whenever the Oak schedule would allow. Ever since COVID, I really haven't been down there as much for various reasons. It's kind of dicey going to other countries sometimes when there are world issues, you know, and I certainly don't want to get stuck in a foreign country. I mean, the US is what it is, but it's still home.
Yeah.
But I've got so many great pictures from down there, Mexico and islands in the Caribbean. And also from all of my years with the Oaks, I've always got those cameras. And William Golden and a monitor guy we had, were a photo team. We would rent a car and just go out and take pictures. I've got stuff that Golden and I took in Tahoe. There's some of my favorite pictures I've ever taken. And so we would do that during the day and then scurry back to the hotel room to get a shower and go play a show that night, you know. And I love my pictures that I've done with different things with the Oaks, and even like military aircraft and stuff that we were, you know, lucky enough to be able to see. And all of that's going to go up. In fact, that this is going to inspire me to go get a new bunch of pictures and give them to her, and she'll get them up there.
Okay. So, what can people expect not only with this new music, but um what can you excite people about for the future? What do you got coming out in the future? Just music?
Yeah, music. I mean, I'm not doing a lot any live playing. I mean, I do go play churches around here, and I've slowly met people from up in these hills. There's a lot of talent up here. I played a church service the other night, last Sunday night, and there was a trio of men of my age group, and they were just singing gospel songs and stuff, and they were really, really good. And they had no idea who I was at first. Then they invited me to go play with them, and then I played with my friend up here, and backed him up. I did a little CD for him, just a vanity thing for church. So I enjoy playing these churches and going in there, and these people up here are serious about their churching. I'm going to tell you.
Oh,
And, you know, these people love God and they're not fake about it, you know, and these services can get intense. But at the end of the day, I come back home, I get in bed and I'll think, you know, I needed that level of churching. I probably have needed it more than what I've gotten. But right now, I'm getting some churching up here.
that's right. And is the church that you go to, is that affecting that new music that you're writing, or are you able to separate that?
No, my music is not really, I mean, I have done this gospel record, which I need to go in and just tidy the mixes up a little, but everyone from Oak World and fans of Oak World have always asked me to do a gospel thing. So I did, and it's 98% done. And I just took some great gospel songs that I enjoy, and I'd like for that to get out too. Oh, here comes the train. I live near a train track. Hang on just a sec.
I do too.
They uh they come by multiple times during the day and throughout the night, but it doesn't bug me at all. It's probably not good for this purpose, but uh gospel music I still love, and I went in there with no real expectation of trying to make it the hottest thing there ever was. I just said, here's a great song, here's the way I play it.
Yeah. And you did it, and I remember when you were working on that gospel record, and some of the I don't want to give too much away. I don't want to give too much away, but if you guys um love Ron's gospel stuff, you guys are gonna love this gospel record. And I can already tell you from the tracks that I've heard, it's gonna be one of the greatest gospel records that you'll hear, and Ron has that way. And Ron, what was on this last record, maybe one of the hardest songs for you to get down
On the gospel record or just the other record?
on your new one?
Well, that one, well, there's this one song that I really like called Accidental Jibe. And that one is for people that understand music theory. That's a bar of 4/4, then a bar of 7/8, then a bar of 4/4, a bar of 7/8. And as a musician, when you start trying to count those odd time signatures, you can get lost pretty easy. But real, what I call musos, they love that kind of stuff because anybody can go boom, chicka boom in 4/4. That's pretty easy to follow. But jazz music and alternative stuff, those time signatures come flying at you, and you got to stand flat footed and be able to hang with it. I'm proud of that. There's a piano solo in there that I did that I really like. I mean, and I'm really tough on what I play, but I like that one.
Yeah, man, it's been an honor to sit here and chat with you, as it always is. What can you excite? What can you tell people about your music on what your goal for this type of music is?
Well, really, again, people aren't buying music, so I'm not doing this to make money, which is fortunate because I'm not. it's just to get it out there. I mean, people have heard me play saloon and leave in Louisiana, and that's great. I'm all about it. But it's the other stuff. I want to show that there are many sides that they probably haven't heard. Now, somebody's not going to like all of it, but that's fine. There are going to be people that will. And my real hope would be that some people that I admire, that I enjoy their playing, maybe if they would hear it, they would go, hey, here's somebody that's, kind of in touch with what I do. And maybe I could hook up with some other players and play some different music with them.
Yeah. It's about building connections, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And that's what it's all about. And what's your piece of advice that you always tell people if they want to keep doing what you're doing, whether it's let's go with music first.
Well, it depends on what you want to do with your music. Actually, I think everyone should have fun with it rather than make it a job. There was a time many years ago when you could get good at what you do and maybe you hook up with a country artist or a gospel artist. That's gotten a lot harder to do because there's hardly any middle class in music now. The very biggest artists, that are running 12 buses and 18 trucks, it's hard to get those gigs. Not sure you'd even want them, but there's really only the lower end. There's not the middle that you could get a job and make a living in music. I was lucky. I came up at a time when you could make a living playing music. I'm not so sure that's easy anymore.
Yeah.
So now I would say, find a career path, be a stockbroker, be a lawyer, be whatever you want, and do your music for fun and stay true to what you believe, whether it's gospel or it's new age or whatever, do it for the fun of it, the love of it. And then maybe you don't make your living at it, but that's okay too. I think it's harder to do that than ever before. In the 80s, if you didn't like the gig you had, well, you could quit and somebody's going to call you within the next little while and you'll get yourself another job. And let's face it, we've all got to pay the bills. My bills still come in whether I'm making any money or not. That seems to never stop. But I was lucky to have made a good living for many, many years. I retired off of what I've done with the Oak Ridge Boys. I mean, I'm so thankful for all of that. And I never closed the door on playing for them again. I mean, I've made that clear. They know that this little phone right here rings, and if they've got a need and it's a need I can fill, they can feel pretty confident, and I think they do that it would be filled.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
I'm just moving in a little bit of a different direction, spending a little more time with family. And if I get up one day and just don't feel like working, I don't. But I've only been retired for less than a week, so tomorrow will be a week. So, we'll see how it goes from here.
Yeah. What would you say to somebody who wants to start producing? What would that piece of advice be for them? Because a lot of people may not know that like you may not be playing, but there's still a lot of work producing.
A producer is sort of like an umpire. It's producing it in different genres of music is different. Somebody's got to make the final call. One thing about bands, I remember Tim Schmidt with the Eagles one time had a great saying. He said, in my experience, bands are on the verge of breaking up at all times. Because you'll have a guy that wants to go left, another guy that wants to go right. Somebody has to make the call. This record has to get out. A producer makes that call. It has to be someone that everybody in the group, if it's a group, or a single artist or duo that respects their opinion. And they need to be plugged into whatever's going on in the genre of music you're trying to record. It's not an easy thing to do, and sometimes it's very much a thankless job. Uh, I've managed to produce in almost every genre of music I've ever worked in, and I do enjoy it. But I'm also an engineer, and most of the time when I'm producing, I'm engineering it as well. And for a bunch of years, I did that at my studio in Nashville, and I'm just starting to do it here again. This studio is different than my Nashville studio, and it's the latest technology. And I tell you, I'm amazed by it. Every day, I'm amazed with how the technology changes, it ramps up, it's easier to do things, it's harder in some ways, but I'm very happy with this little studio in here.
Yeah. And Ron, I'm so excited for people to hear this new music that you have to be releasing within the next few weeks. And I jokingly told Ron that I'm joking, but I'm also serious to know that if you ever need a play, if you ever get too bored and you need a co-host, I if you ever want to come co-host with me, you call me. You got you a job right here.
Okay, I'll remember that.
But and maybe we can co-host. Maybe we can talk Fred Satterfield into joining this podcast.
No, I
And
think we could. Yeah.
how about we do this? The KGC show and Ron Fairchild will come together for one episode, and we'll interview Fred Satterfield.
Well, that'll be fantastic because not only is a great musician and one of my oldest friends ever, uh, he's a funny guy and he's got a way of putting things that always makes me laugh. And uh, I've had some of the most fun times I've ever had in my life with Fred. And most of my stories seem to include him somewhere. So we'll put the elbow on him and get him to do it, and I think he'll be all for it.
Well, then I think we just found us a great episode. The three guys, KGC, Ron Fairchild, and David or Fred Satterfield. I almost said
Yep.
David Northrup.
There's a unique human being.
Yeah, that is. And he's out touring with Joe Nichols, so we do wish the best to David and to Fred and to Chris Golden, all the Oaks drummers. And there was another one, Pete Cummings, wasn't it, right?
Well, Pete was a guitar player. Yeah, he passed away in 17 or 18. I miss Pete. He was one of my oldest friends. I played music with Pete when I was a young teenager, 13 years old. He gave me a shot, and I have so much admiration for Pete's talent, and he went way too soon.
Yeah. Well, it's getting close to that time of the show where we start winding things down, but I do want to get your remember your old times about everybody's favorite Joe Bonzo, and not only what did he mean to you, not only as a person, but what did his life mean to you as someone who's been around him for so many times?
Well, he's Joe. I mean, it's always so easy when somebody passes, they become glorified. But Joe was glorified in his own way. He and I were just always super close. I would do something that would make him butt heads with me sometimes, but he and I, even through the tennis days, we used to try to kill each other on tennis court. And the man was just so full of energy. I mean, when there was nothing in my tank, I'd go siphon some out of his, sucking on the hose, out of Joe's fuel tank. But he was always positive, even when things really weren't that good. And over the last 3 or 4 years, when he started developing some issues, started out he's just having trouble walking, and by his last year, it was painful for me to even look at him being carried on stage because that's not the way I'm going to remember Joe. I'm going to remember the Joe that I had so much dadgum fun with, and it's absolutely impossible to go on without Joe, which brings up something that people are very divided on. Ben James, who is a dear friend of mine already, I got to know him very well over the last almost a year. And that guy, man, he's smart because he knows you don't replace Joe. He'll be the first one to tell you. But he's got a job to do, and he goes out there and he sings great. But by no means is he trying to replace Joe because that's like trying to replace Pete Rose. He's gone. You ain't going to replace him.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's Charlie Hustle. Well, that's Joe Hustle. I mean, the guy was just, I think, the best MC, master of ceremonies kind of guy that I ever saw. He was just knew how to talk to the crowd and could adjust his rap to whatever the kind of crowd it was. If they were drinking and rowdy at a show, he knew how to talk to them. But if it was a church somewhere, Joe knew how to talk to them. He was the best ever. And poor Dwayne, I mean, I know he's doing a good job too, but he had to not only step in and try to cover some other things for Joe, but he's got to do the emceeing now. And although he did that in the gospel days and did a fine job, Joe set a bar so dadgum high that
Yeah.
I don't know who could come in and do it, you know. But they're carrying on. There are people that think it should have stopped whenever Joe couldn't do it anymore. I'm not going to get involved in that because I was a part of the group without Joe, and I do think the world of Ben, and he's a dear friend. I could pick up the phone right now and just yuck it up with him too, but that's because he's got the right attitude about it. And there's
Mm.
no question he's a fine singer. But missing Joe, I'm going to tell you that I miss Joe every day. And stories come into my head about him, and I realize that I got his number right here. And I would just call him up and we'd bust each other up. Little, little things like there's a story that only the Oak Ridge boys would know about every Thanksgiving Day. And Joe and I had a tradition for going back as long as I've been around. I would call him every Thanksgiving over this little thing that happened many, many moons ago. And I know I can't do that anymore. I call his number, it's going to be dead. So the hurt over Joe, it's never going to go away. And it's true with Nora Lee and Rusty too. I mean, you don't just delineate, but Joe, I worked with so closely, and being without him, no, that hurt's going to take a long time.
Yeah. Wow. Just thank you for sharing that, and thank you for Joe Bonzel was the first one out of the Oaks to tell me that he loved me, really, and tell me that he appreciated me being a fan. And Rusty was on my show. I loved having Rusty on, and Nora Lee Allen was historic for her, not only her Grand Ole Opry stuff, but just her attitude in life within itself. And those are all three people that are truly, truly big names, and so we thank you guys for, and I know that there's more people in the Oaks camp that have gone on to be with the Lord, but when I think that when I think of my show and like my audience, I think that they would uh really, really like an in-depth kind of like tribute to those guys, and I think that we just did that, and so thank you so much for helping me honor all three of those people.
Well, they all deserve it. I mean, Nora Lee that's one class. She was class no matter what it was. And Rusty, of course, Rusty's a house of fire and all that, but Rusty was a dear friend. And we just have so many things we could laugh at. And then Joe, we just talked about. So these people, they're irreplaceable in your life. We're trying to move on from it, but it doesn't make it easy.
Yeah, sure. I truly do. I want to send my love not only to Ron Fairchild. Thank you so much, buddy, for coming back on our show and hanging out with us and spilling the beans with us for a few. And thank you for always being such a dear friend. And thank you to Joe Bonzel for your legacy. Thank you to Rusty Golden for yours as well. Our thoughts and prayers are with Dwayne and William Lee and all of the Oaks camp and with Ron as well. But Ron, I've truly enjoyed talking with you, and thanks so much for coming on here and promoting your music, man. I love talking to you.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate you having me.
You're I tell people you're like one of my top five favorite people, top three actually favorite people to have on our show. On our show,
Honor. It's an honor.
yeah, you're one of my best friends, and thank you, and to everybody out there, thank you guys so much for the success, and not only that, but thank you guys for the continued support. I know that you guys could support anybody, but the fact that I have as many people as I do coming back to our show and coming back to this show, it means a lot to me. And it means more to me to get great friends and great family members on like Ron Fairchild. And it just warms my heart to know that people still want to keep coming back. So thank you guys. And thank you, Ron, for coming on. And we will keep getting you on here as much as you keep getting music out. You might have to be a co-host.
I'll be up for it.
Thank you guys so much, and thank you guys for believing in me. Believe in yourselves. Love God, love one another, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, Ron. They